Cardigan and Flicker, Valley Guardians. Everyone stay close, Cardigan called out, taking a deep breath. Instead of fire, a dazzling explosion of colorful blossoms erupted from her mouth, creating a fragrant and disorienting cloud in the tunnel. Pink petals and blue vines swirled through the air, momentarily obscuring the imp's vision. "Now's our chance," Rayden shouted. He started to move quickly through the tunnel, Camden leading the way with his bright glow. Flicker, though small, darted through the flower cloud, his blue scales making him difficult to see against the swirling petals. Aurora stayed close to Buster, her purple scales shimmering nervously. Buster, despite his fear of enclosed spaces, found a surge of protectiveness for his new friends. He lowered his head and charged forward, his powerful body bumping against the tunnel walls, dislodging loose rocks and creating a rumbling sound that startled the imps. "Keep going, Buster," Flicker called back encouragingly. "You're like a bouncing boulder." The imps, momentarily stunned by Cardigan's floral burst and Buster's unexpected charge, stumbled and chittered in confusion. However, their glowing red eyes soon pierced through the dissipating flower cloud, and they began to pursue the fleeing group. Rayden pointed with Camden towards a faint light at the end of the tunnel. "Almost there, I could see the exit." But the imps were fast, their small shadowy forms scurrying along the ground and even clinging to the sides of the tunnel. One of them leaped onto Flicker's tail, nipping at his scales. "Ouch," Flicker yelped, shaking his tail to dislodge the pesky imp. Seeing her friend in trouble, Cardigan swooped down, releasing another burst of smaller, thorny roses that pricked the imps, causing them to screech and fall back. As they neared the tunnel exit, the light grew brighter. They could see the lush green of the outside world just ahead, but the imps were relentless, their numbers seeming to multiply in the darkness. Suddenly, Rayden stopped. "There's a narrow passage to the left. It might slow them down." He pointed Camden towards a small opening in the tunnel wall, barely wide enough for Buster to squeeze through. "Go on," Rayden urged. "I'll hold them off for a moment." He raised Camden, and the carrot staff pulsed with a bright orange light, momentarily blinding the pursuing imps. Buster, though hesitant about another tight space, knew they had no choice. He squeezed through the narrow passage, followed by Aurora and Flicker. Cardigan, with a final fragrant blast of sleepy lavender that made some of the imps yawn, flew through the opening as well. Rayden was the last to squeeze through, just as the first of the enraged imps reached the narrow passage. They were out of the dark tunnel and back into the sunlight, but they knew the imp army wouldn't be far behind. Panting slightly, they emerged from the narrow passage into the sun-drenched white stone fields, with pink flowers of crystal. But there was no time to admire the view. The chittering and angry screeches of the imp army echoed from the tunnel behind them. "They're still coming," Flicker cried, looking back with wide eyes. "We need to get away from here," Cardigan said urgently. "Buster, you need to get on my back." Buster gave her a scared look. "Now! We have to get above them," Cardigan encouraged him. Just then, a shadow fell over them. A large, magnificent white dragon with scales the color of snow landed gracefully nearby. He had sharp, intelligent yellow eyes and a plume of smoke gently curled from his nostrils. "What's all the commotion?" the white dragon boomed, his voice like distant thunder. He noticed the small, shadowy figures pouring out of the tunnel. "Imps! What are they doing so far from the shadow peaks?" "They're after us," Flicker explained. "We might have banished their leader a while ago." The white dragon chuckled, a deep, rumbling sound. "Ah, so you're the ones who caused that little stir. Well, it seems they haven't forgotten your kindness." He turned his gaze to Buster, noticing his hesitant posture. "Why isn't a strong-looking red dragon like you soaring through the sky?" Buster shuffled his claws. "I'm scared to fly. I've never really managed it." The white dragon's eyes softened slightly. "Fear can be a heavy weight, young one, but sometimes the only way to escape what's chasing you is to take flight." He spread his massive wings. "My name is Orion. I'm the guardian of the Veil.
Perhaps I can offer a little encouragement." The imps were getting closer, their chittering growing louder. One of them leaped towards Aurora, its tiny red eyes filled with malice. Instinctively, Buster spread his own large wings. They felt heavy and unfamiliar, but the sight of the imp threatening his friend sparked a surge of determination within him. He flapped them awkwardly, feeling a strange, unsteady lift. Orion watched with a keen eye. "That's it. Feel the wind beneath your wings. Trust them." With a grunt of effort, Buster flapped harder. He wobbled unsteadily, but then, slowly, miraculously, he began to rise in the air. It was clumsy and uneven, but he was flying. Aurora cheered, her purple scales sparkling with relief. Flicker zipped around Buster, his blue form a blur against the white stone around them. Cardigan released a shower of encouraging sunflowers that drifted upwards with them. Orion took to the sky as well, circling above them. "Well done, my young friend. You see, the sky was waiting for you." He then turned his attention to the approaching imp army, a fierce glint in his eye. He took a deep breath and unleashed a torrent of bright green flames, forcing the imps to scatter and retreat back into the tunnel. "Thank you," Buster called out to Orion, a wide grin on his face. The fear was still there, but it was overshadowed by the exhilarating feeling of flight. "You had it in you all along," Orion replied with a wink. "Sometimes all it takes is a little push, and maybe a few angry imps." With the imp threat temporarily gone, Orion landed gracefully beside them, the warmth radiating from his scales comforting. "It seems our little valley is becoming quite the hub for adventure," he rumbled. Buster, still a little shaky but beaming with pride, hovered just above the ground. "I actually flew," he exclaimed, looking at his wings in amazement. "You certainly did," Orion said, with a hearty laugh. "And with a bit more practice, you'll be soaring like the wind." He looked at Cardigan with a soft expression. "It seems you've made quite the impression on those little shadow creatures." "They weren't very happy about their leader leaving," Flicker chirped. "Well, sometimes, standing up for what's right can ruffle a few feathers. Or scales," Orion said wisely. "But it's always worth it." "Orion," Cardigan said, her flower-filled eyes looking at him with gratitude. "Thank you for your help. Are you heading anywhere in particular?" "Nowhere urgent," Orion replied. "I was just enjoying the morning sun, but perhaps I could join your little band for a while. It sounds like your adventures are far from over, and it's always good to have a bit of fire on your side, and flower power, of course." He winked at Cardigan. They were all thrilled to have such a strong and experienced dragon to join them. "That would be wonderful," Aurora exclaimed, her purple tail swishing excitedly. "Great," Orion said. "Now, young Buster, how about a little flying lesson? The sky is the limit, quite literally." And so, under Orion's patient guidance, Buster began to practice flying. Orion showed him how to catch the air currents, how to angle his wings for better lift, and how to land without tumbling. It wasn't always smooth, and there were a few wobbly moments, but Buster was determined. As they flew together, Orion shared stories of the valley and its creatures. He told them about the mischievous spites that hid in the mushroom circles, the shy water dragons that lived in the hidden waterfalls, and the ancient, wise stone turtles that carried the history of the land on their shells. Cardigan shared stories of the flower fields and the joy of bringing life to the barren lands. Flicker told tales of his explorations and the delicious berries he had discovered. Aurora spoke of the wonders of the whispering woods and the gentle wisdom of her father. Around a crackling campfire that evening, Orion told them about the shadow peaks and the strange, shadowy creatures that lived there, including the imps and their banished leader. He explained that the imps were often driven by jealousy and desire to cause trouble. "It's important to remember," Orion said, his voice warm in the firelight, "that even those who seem mean or scary are often just misunderstood or hurting in some way. That doesn't excuse their actions, but understanding can sometimes help us find better ways to deal with them." As the stars twinkled above them, they all felt a growing bond of friendship and understanding. Buster was no longer afraid to fly. Flicker felt valued for his kindness. Cardigan's healing touch was appreciated, and Aurora was experiencing the wonders of the world beyond her forest. With Orion by their side, they felt ready for whatever adventures lay ahead. The next morning, Rayden seemed particularly thoughtful. He tapped Camden, his carrot staff, gently on the ground as they walked through a field of buzzing lavender. "Something on your mind, Rayden?" Cardigan asked, noticing his quiet demeanor. Rayden sighed softly. "I've been thinking about those imps. They don't usually venture this far from the Shadow Peaks, unless something is truly amiss." "Do you think their banished leader might be trying to rally them?" Flicker asked, his blue eyes worried. "It's possible," Orion rumbled, a plume of smoke escaping his nostrils. "Imps are not known for their forgiveness." Rayden stopped and held Camden out in front of him. The carrot staff began to glow faintly, pulsing with a soft orange light. "Camden sensing something," he said, his voice hushed. "A disturbance in the magical energies of the valley. It feels prickly and unpleasant, like a patch of thorny weeds." "Can Camden tell us where it's coming from?" Aurora asked, her blue eyes wide with curiosity. Rayden closed his eyes, concentrating. Camden's glow intensified, and the top of the carrot slowly began to point in a specific direction, towards a winding path that led into a shadowy part of the forest they hadn't explored. "It seems that the source of this unpleasantness lies that way," Rayden said, opening his eyes. "Camden feels a strong connection to the magical balance of this land, and it's clearly agitated." "Do you think it's the imps?" Buster asked, still a little nervous but trying to sound brave. "It could be," Orion replied, "or it could be something else entirely. The Shadow Peaks are known for more than just the imps." They decided to follow Camden's guidance. The winding path led them deeper into the forest, where the trees grew darker and the air felt cooler. Strange, the pink crystals turned blue, and the twisted roots snaked across the path, and the usual cheerful sounds of birdsong were replaced by an eerie silence. As they walked, Rayden explained more about Camden. "He's more than just a walking stick. He's attuned to the life force of this valley. He can sense imbalances, locate hidden pathways, and he has a few defensive spells that he can cast if needed." Suddenly, Camden began to vibrate more strongly, and his glow intensified even further. Rayden stopped abruptly. "We're getting close," he whispered. "I can feel it now, too. A dark, unsettling energy in the air." Ahead, through the dense trees, they could see a clearing. In the center of the clearing, a strange, shadowy structure pulsing with a faint, malevolent light. It looked like a twisted version of a tree, its leaves sharp and jagged, and its center emitting a sickly green glow. Rayden held Camden aloft. "Whatever it is, it's disturbing the magic of the valley. We need to be careful." It seemed their peaceful journey had taken a turn towards something much more dangerous. The mystery of the shadowy structure and its connection to the imps was about to be revealed. Cautiously, the 5 dragons and the rabbit wizard stepped into the clearing. The air here felt cold and heavy, a stark contrast to the warmth, buzzing energy of the rest of the valley. The strange structure in the center of the clearing was even more unsettling up close. It looked like a giant, twisted, ominous tree, but instead of vibrant leaves, they had sharp, jagged points that seemed to writhe slightly. A sickly green light pulsed from its dark center, and the ground around it was dead and barren. Tiny, shadowy figures scurried around the base of the tree. The imps. "Look," Aurora whispered, pointing with a trembling claw. "They're feeding it something." The imps were dragging small, dark stones towards the scary tree and pushing them into the dead earth around its roots. As they did, the green light in the center of the tree pulsed brighter. Rayden's eyes narrowed. He held Camden out, and the carrot staff trembled, its orange glow flickering nervously. "This is what Camden was sensing," he said grimly. "This is the shadow bloom. It feeds on darkness and negativity, and it drains the life force from the land around it." "Why would the imps build something like this?" Cardigan asked, a frown creasing her brow. She looked at the dead ground, feeling a pang of sadness. "Imps thrive on chaos and unhappiness," Orion rumbled, his voice low and serious. "Their banished leader, he was particularly skilled at creating destruction. This bloom, it feels like his work, even if he isn't here. As if summoned by his name, a chilling, cackling laugh echoed through the clearing. It didn't come from any of the imps, but it seemed to shimmer in the air itself.
Foolish dragons!
The disembodied voice sneered.
You thought you could simply banish me and all would be well. My power is rooted deeper than you know.
The leader, Flicker gasped, hiding behind Cardigan's leg. Rayden tightened his grip on Camden. His influence remains. The shadow bloom is a way for him to spread his dark energy even from where he is banished. The imps are his little helpers, making the valley weak and unhappy. Buster, who had been watching the imps, nervously puffed out his chest. They're making the valley sad and killing the flowers. He looked at Cardigan, his eyes blazed with a newfound courage. Exactly, Cardigan said, her gentle demeanor replaced with determination. This tree is hurting the land and everything that lives here. Orion spread his wings, a small puff of smoke escaping his nose. This explains why the imps are so persistent in the tunnel. They're protecting their master's vile creation. They all looked at the pulsing shadow bloom and the scurrying imps. It was clear this wasn't just about finding sunberries or overcoming a fear of flying anymore. This was about protecting their home and the beauty of the valley. We have to stop it, Aurora said firmly, her earlier fear replaced with a quiet resolve. But how? Flicker asked, looking at the menacing bloom. Rayden looked at Camden, which was now glowing steadily, as if ready for action. The shadow bloom feeds on darkness. Perhaps it can be defeated by light and light. He looked at Cardigan, a knowing look in his eyes. Cardigan understood immediately. Her breath didn't bring fire and destruction, it brought flowers and healing. Her power was the opposite of the bloom's darkness. The imp army, sensing the dragon's intentions, began to gather, their red eyes fixed on the intruders. The final confrontation was coming. The imp army swarmed towards them, their tiny claws sharp and their eyes filled with rage. Orion roared, a blast of hot fire erupting from his mouth, creating a wall of flames that momentarily held the imps back. Cardigan, now! Rayden urged, holding Camden aloft. The carrot staff pulsed with a warm golden light, focusing its energy. Taking a deep breath, Cardigan flew towards the shadow bloom. She could feel its cold, draining energy, but she focused on the warmth of her own inner light. As she reached the thorny petals, she exhaled a torrent of the most vibrant, life-filled flowers she had ever bloomed. Giant purple lilies, with petals the color of the sunset. Luminous roses that chimed with gentle energy, and fragrant irises that pulsed with a soft, healing light burst forth from her snout. The flowers didn't just appear. They seemed to radiate pure joy. As the flowers touched the shadow bloom, a hissing sound filled the air. The dark petals recoiled as if burned by the light. The sickly green glow from its center flickered and dimmed. The imps shrieked, recoiling from the bright blossoms. Their shadowy forms seemed to shrink and fade in the presence of so much life. Buster, impressed by Cardigan's display, took to the air, no longer hesitant. He swooped down, using his strong claws to tear at the base of the shadow bloom, ripping away the dark stones the imps had been feeding it. Flicker, darting through the air, blew gentle puffs of his own white smoke onto the wilting flowers near the bloom. His breath seemed to carry a subtle, revitalizing energy that helped the healthy plants around the shadow bloom regain their vibrancy. Aurora, remembering her grandfather's wisdom about the valley's magic, closed her eyes and focused her inner energy. A soft purple glow emanated from her scales. She gently directed this energy towards the shadow bloom, adding her own unique life force to Cardigan's floral assault. Suddenly, 3 imps began to move quickly over to Aurora. Orion, noticing them, spread his wings and started to rise into the air. With one good flap, Orion sent the imps tumbling backwards. Rayden, with Camden leading the charge, moved amongst the remaining imps. The carrot staff glowed brightly, and with a flick of his wrist, beams of warm orange light shot out, not harming the imps, but gently pushing them back, disrupting their connection to the shadow bloom. The banished imp leader's disembodied voice shrieked in frustration.
No! My power! It's fading.
As more and more of Cardigan's vibrant flowers enveloped the shadow bloom, its dark energy began to dissipate. The thorny petals softened and curled inwards. The sickly green light finally extinguished. The shadow bloom withered and collapsed into a pile of harmless black dust. With the source of their dark power gone, the remaining imps whimpered and scattered, disappearing back into the shadowy parts of the forest. The oppressive cold in the clearing lifted, replaced by a sense of warmth and relief. Cardigan landed gently, surrounded by her beautiful blossoms. The dead ground around where the shadow bloom had stood began to show tiny sprouts of green. With the shadow bloom gone and the imp army scattered, a sense of peace settled over the clearing. The air felt lighter, and the first rays of morning sunlight filtered through the trees, illuminating the dew-kissed petals of Cardigan's flowers. Rayden approached the spot where the shadow bloom had stood, Camden humming softly in his paw. "The darkness is gone," he said, a smile spreading over his whiskered face. "The valley can heal now." Cardigan felt a warmth spread through her as she looked at the tiny green sprouts emerging from the once barren earth. Buster landed softly beside her. "We did it," he said, a grin stretching across his red snout. "We actually did it together." Flicker zipped around them, chirping happily. "The valley can be beautiful again." Aurora, her purple scales glowing softly in the light, looked at her new friends with affection. "We were all different, but our differences made us strong." Orion landed beside them. "Indeed, each of us brought something unique and valuable to this fight. Cardigan's life-giving blossoms, Buster's strength, Flicker's subtle energy, Aurora's inner light, Rayden's wisdom, and even a little bit of fiery encouragement from yours truly," he chuckled. "Let's not forget your wings, Orion," Buster chuckled. "You quite literally swept them off their feet." As they stood in the clearing, watching the first wildflowers begin to bloom, they knew they had faced a great challenge and overcame it together. The banished imp leader's influence had been broken, and the valley was safe once more. Rayden turned to Cardigan. "You have a remarkable gift. Your flowers bring more than just beauty. They bring healing and hope." "And Flicker," Orion added, "never underestimate the power of kindness and a gentle touch. Your breath helped to rekindle the life around the darkness." Buster looked at his wings, no longer with fear, but with a sense of accomplishment. "And I learned that even if you're scared, you could still be brave for your friends." Aurora smiled. "And I learned that the world outside the Whispering Woods is full of both challenges and wonderful dragons." As the sun rose higher, painting the sky in hues of orange and gold, they knew their adventures together were far from over. They had learned valuable lessons about self-acceptance, the strength of friendship, and the power of embracing their unique abilities. They spent the rest of the day helping the valley heal. Cardigan spread her flowers across the barren areas. Flicker helped to nurture the recovering plants. Buster used his strength to clear away any lingering darkness, and Aurora shared stories of hope and resilience. Rayden, with Camden, guided them to places where their help was most needed. And Orion watched over them all, a true protector of the Vale. As the day drew to a close, they gathered by a sparkling stream, the air filled with the sweet scent of Cardigan's blossoms. They knew that even though challenges might arise again, they would face them together, their unique strengths intertwined, their friendship a bond stronger than any shadow. The valley was blooming with hope, and their futures were bright with the promise of more adventures to come.
Sweet dreams, and thank you for listening.
And just like that, the epic adventure of Cardigan and Flicker, Valley Guardians, the movie has come to an end. We hope you loved every magical moment and every catchy tune. But don't worry, the journey is far from over for these beloved heroes. If you're new to their world, you might not know that the story of the Valley Guardians continues in our exciting show format. And the best part? Get ready to mark your calendars because Season 2, Cardigan and Flicker, Valley Guardians The Leviathan's Awakening, is on its way with brand new episodes. Plus, for all you movie lovers, this thrilling new season will also be transformed into its very own feature film. So buckle up, grab your popcorn, and prepare for even more grand adventures to come.